This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bintliff. My friend Nelson Tepfer, he's the CEO at ProCFO Partners. He's with us. And Marcia Zaruba O'Connor is our very special guest today. She's the CEO and founder of the O'Connor Group, and they specialize in talent acquisition and HR outsourcing with a fractional model, which is interesting, right, team? So I think, Marcia, one of the things that I kind of want to just start off in asking you is about this fractional model. Why is that? We talk a lot about how that's beneficial from the finance side at ProCFO Partners, but talk to me just a little bit about the value of that from the HR side, specifically in context of, well, why can't I go get a piece of software that does that for me? Or why can't I just take my whomever and cut their hours down to whatever and they'll do whatever? Talk to me a little bit about why the fractional model in the HR space is valuable and beneficial, and maybe why I should be considering it if I haven't.
Chris, excellent question to get started here. I think it really comes down to a lot of HR are burnt out. A lot of them are specialized in usually one area. And I think CEOs now are looking for in a bunch of areas. And I don't know about you, but pretty much every week now, there's a new regulation. Law. EEOC has some new guidelines and all too. They had a new I-9. All that stuff is really difficult to stay on top of, as well as basically be the HR leader within the organization. So we always say we either basically complement or we take care of the HR department. And so we try to tell people we're not here to hurt an HR department. We're here to complement, because I feel as if we have expertise all the way from compensation experts, all the way up to regulation experts, all the way to really being that strategic ear to a CEO.
You know, that's familiar, isn't it, Nelson? So with that in context, I have this sort of burning question, which is I want to talk about a little bit about kind of talent acquisition and its intersection with today and tomorrow. So we're on this verge of really exciting things. Nelson and I've talked about a lot of it. So have many other CFOs at ProCFO Partners around technology changes and obviously AI and so many new and exciting things. And we're starting to be able to think differently about the roles in our organizations and who's doing what and why they're doing that thing, and what specialities are required, what skill sets are required, what upskilling is required. Talk to me a little bit about how that future, which is like 10 minutes away, right? We're always just right next to the thing that's about to happen. How does that exist next to the talent that I need right now? How do I solve the problems that I need right now? Confident that that's going to be something that is going to sustain me as things continue to change as dramatically and as swiftly as they are. I mean, in the last 5 years, we've seen things we've never seen for all different reasons, but we're really in sort of breakneck speed. Talk to me just a little bit about that. I don't know, that relationship. How do I think about that?
Well, that is a really long question that you added about 5 questions in there. And so I would say the talent basically for like work is always going to be there. I thought it for a while that it wasn't going to be, we're going to catch up. We're not catching up. We do not have enough people out there. If you look at the numbers, unemployment was 3.8, and that's like unheard of considering the fact that people are hiring, but not as much, but there's still the war for talent. And the special skills, obviously, people will always be in demand and need for special skills, just always. And I always tell people, if you want to always have a job, like be an engineer, be an accountant, have something behind you, have like that computer science background and all too. So always have that job. But it's also about getting things done. And what's happening is that, there's a lot of people that retired, a lot of women basically left the workforce. I think it's like 5.1 million women left the workforce during COVID because they didn't feel comfortable with what's happening with their kids and education. And so they decided to quit. Well, a lot of them didn't come back. And a lot of them are basically coming back on a part-time basis as well. So having that flexibility and that options and the lack of childcare is a really big deal. So that talent side is always going to be there. I'm always a big bench, even when you don't need it. So for every like really important job in your organization, you should have at least 5 people ready to go and say, hey, I just need 2 weeks to, they have to quit and give notice and all too and come on board. But you got to have that bench, because I think people are losing sight to all that, which is why it makes it very sensible to have an organization like ProCFO or the O'Connor Group to come in on the HR and the recruiting side, because we actually complement a lot of those teams in regards to having another full-time equivalent to basically having a part-time person and needed when needed. Because we all know it's slow in January, it's slow in December. So why would you have a full-time person, use basically this interim fractional model that's out there to hire these people, because that talent need isn't going to go away anytime soon. And listen, it's not just the HR and the recruiting department, it's responsibility. It's the entire organization's responsibility for recruiting at all times, and so you have to be careful what you say, what you do, but you also have to have a mission. You have to have a purpose. People want to go to places that have a purpose and a mission, and they want to feel like, do people look like me there? Do I have a voice over there? So people will say that they have all that, but when you get internally, a lot of places do not. So it's stuff like that you have to work on and really manage to make sure that you really truly have that culture where people want to work at.
Oh, you brought up some really great points. I'm so glad that you mentioned around women in the workplace. And we saw some interesting generational things sort of happening too around COVID. And I want to peel that back a little bit, but you said a couple of things that Nelson, I kind of want to check in with you on, which is, I guess this idea of how does that talent acquisition strategically, how do we not just fill gaps? How do we, from a finance perspective, but also just your strategic mind, how are we thinking strategically when we're bringing fractional or when we're bringing in, when we're acquiring new talent? How do we not just think, well, we've got a problem, we need to solve it, but we think strategically around, we don't even know what problems we might have. So we also need somebody who can come in here and help us see what we don't see.
Great question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nelson.
No, I was going to say that is actually where we align very well together with a group like Marcia's over there, is because it does start at the strategic side. As an objective of the organization, what are we working towards? The pieces we're going to need, then that allows us to have that clarity around how we're defining the pieces that we need, and then how are we actually going to go bring in that right track, the right level of talent that's going to help us do this. But it starts at the strategic level and the objectives. What are we as an organization moving forward? What are we working towards? To your point, Chris, we have no idea how AI is going to impact the workplace in 3 years from now. But as an organization, you should know what you're working towards over the next 3 to 5 years. And that isn't going to change. AI may help you do it faster, easier, better, may change the talent of what you may need to actually help you get there. But it's not going to change where you're trying to take the organization, unless you happen to be in AI development. And obviously the pieces you're developing are still in R&D around those kind of things, which is an entirely separate organization. But for most companies in most industries, the next 3 to 5 years, those are what they're working towards as a goal for the organization, as a and the strategies that are going to help them get there shouldn't be as fickle as depending on which technology tool is most readily available to them today. Oh,
that's such a good point. And it's so crucial, because we have this shiny object syndrome, right? Where we look at the thing and all the headlines and the hype and wow, I better get somebody in who can do that. And you make a great point to keep your eye on the ball, which is, where are you planning on being in X amount of time? Marcia, do you operate in that same sort of 3 to 5 years, or how do you like to position as you're connecting with the folks that you work with, as you're thinking from that strategic lens? What's your perspective there? What's the coaching that you like to give in that space?
We like to do recruiting strategies and HR strategies. And the idea is it's like a calendar year, and you want to figure out, when you have all this hiring to do, there are certain months that you should be actually spending hiring for people versus other not, because there are certain times of year that people are waiting for their bonus, they're waiting for their holidays, they're waiting for their vacation. And so I try to be very strategic when we align with our clients, because right away they're like, I need to hire a person now. I'm like, you want to hire an accountant full time and you want to do it in December. Well, good luck, because they're about to do tax season or audit season. If you come from a public accounting, you have to think like that in order to get the best candidate. Now, having somebody in May and June, probably a little bit better, because they're exhausted, they're tired. So, start putting the seeds down basically in the springtime, talking to individuals to get them on board at that time frame. But you really have to be really cautious about doing that. And that's why it's really important to have, colleagues like, ProCFO, because if you need that interim help, and they always do, it's a great spot to say, say, hey, I'm going to need 6 months of your person. I'm going to hire somebody, but it's not the right time right now. And so we're the ones basically coming to the clients and say, it's a great idea, but is it the right time right now? Because we see all this and you want to make sure you're spending money wisely. And listen, it's the increases this year for salaries were crazy. You were looking at 10 to 15% overall increases overall to hit up with inflation and all. And I still don't think we're probably where we're at where we need to be. But with wage, transparency coming out now, you're going to see a lot of job descriptions. They're going to have on there pretty much that minimum to that medium of where salaries are going to be. It hasn't hit, like we're in Pennsylvania, it hasn't hit us yet. It's hit California. It's hit basically New York. It's going to hit us eventually too. So people have to take a look at that. You can't really ask, what are you making now? It's where what would you like to be making, and where are you at with that? So you have to be very careful as a recruiter to really dive into skills, to really dive into, give me examples, talk about this, talk about that, keep in contact with people too, because you may have this great person just at the right time right now. But in 2 years from now, we're going to stay in touch. And so I love having alumni parties at our clients. A lot of people refuse to because this person left us. I'm like, listen, they're your best advocate. They might not have been the right fit, but if they're out there and they leave on good terms, they're going to be one of your best mini marketers out there. So keep in contact with them because more than likely they're going to refer other people to your clients as well as new customers too. And so it's interesting how you look at it, but I do think, got to keep in mind, it's been so busy in recruiting the past 2 years that a lot of recruiters are basically just trying to catch air and make sure they're breathing again because it was constant positions to fill. And now it's a step back this year because it's not as busy. So now it's a great year for strategy. It's a great year because 2025 is going to be busy again in recruiting. So are you ready for it?
Marcia, you bring up so many interesting ideas. And for me, it brings to mind so many of the same things Nelson and I often talk about, which is when I'm stuck in the trenches of doing this job, I can sometimes miss or simply lack the energy for sort of this conceptual energy that you're having around thinking about problem solving, thinking about seasonality, thinking about what's coming, thinking about these sort of levels of transparency and opacity that are they're buzzing around me, but I might not have the energy to give it to it. I appreciate that. I appreciate those perspectives. So you mentioned a couple things earlier around, for me, they were culture, Is it, how do I like to work? Is this a place that I like to work? Is there a challenge in having a fractional model being able to fit into culturally an organization? And how do you kind of moderate that? Or what are your checks and balances to both as you're bringing talent in or making recommendations or however that works for you, but also just the organizations that you work with? What's some guidance that you have around here's how to think about culture in that way?
It's really interesting. It's an interesting question around culture as it is, because there's so many companies that claim we got the best culture. This is what we do. And then when you really
dig posters on our wall, we can prove it, right?
Right. I'm like, it's not a poster. It's really an act of how you guys think about work, live work, and believe in work. And I really think it's different for each company. But then when you get in there, people realize this wasn't what I signed up for. And so you have to be really careful because honestly, we're a hybrid organization. I don't really request people to come in. I do have my operations and my sales and marketing come in 2 days a week, but my other guys are literally remote and keep that kind of world because they're working at 4 or 5 clients. And the fact is they're doing such a good job. They keep going and keep going with the same clients. They're helping with that culture. And each one's a little different. So you have to be very cognizant of changing your thinking that day because you're talking to this group is very lively and vivacious. This group is very quiet, you know what I mean? But you still have to be that HR, that liaison. And what we're finding now too is because during COVID, listen, I hate to say this, COVID was horrible for so many people, but it did make HR cool again. It made us now a seat at the table and needed. But I can tell you now, people want to see HR in person. And they look at it, if it's HR is in person, then my team will be in person. Then they won't complain because my HR is, even though my HR isn't full time. But people don't have any stipulation with that anymore. They did. They looked at it as they're not one of us. But I think through COVID, that has changed completely. And now we're part of that team, whether or not we're full-time employee or not.
Nelson, Marcia raises interesting ideas for me around do I enjoy what I'm doing and with whom I'm doing it? And there's a straight line from that to, and how well am I doing my job? How fast, how efficient am I doing my job? Which is productivity. That's the stuff of bottom line impact, I guess. When you are thinking about so many of these changes that we've been undergoing, but also what's happening, what's the future from your perspective around this idea of productivity or the culture of work? Because I think this is an interesting thing, and culture can be so like, I don't know. It's something where we bring a consultant in and we have a 3-day workshop and we feel really great about ourselves, and we don't live it. We don't sustain it. And that's challenging. Like I'm not trying to like say folks are doing the wrong thing. It is tricky to prioritize something that is hard to define for so many.
Mm-hmm.
So from where you said, where's that angle from, especially from that sort of finance angle around, well, here's why team, that's more important than just words and posters.
So it's an interesting point. And Marcia, I know you've been through this at various stages because both of us work with scaling organizations. And it is fascinating to see when the culture becomes something you actually have to do versus just something that happens because of the leaders and business owners who are involved with it at the early stages of the organization.
Yes.
It's a culture by design versus culture by default conversation. Whereas when organizations are a certain size, culture is default. This is who they are. This is how they show up together. This is how they work together. As companies grow, and that doesn't happen anymore. So then it needs to be a culture by design. From our perspective as CFOs, recognizing the impact of culture on an organization, recognizing the actual value it places on the organization is really key to actually bring it to the forefront and actually have those conversations around how we're investing in it. Because business owners, I find for the very often, especially as they're growing, don't even recognize that the culture has changed or shifted around them because they're so used to culture being them. Culture, they are an organization. It's how they show up. But as the organizations grow, and they're no longer interacting with everybody even anymore, if at all, for some of the members of the organization, culture needs to be that constant investment. Because Chris, to your point, productivity, turnover, you can look at any number of metrics of what it costs when it doesn't happen well, and therefore why it's so important to continue to invest and to drive the organization forward.
You know what's funny about that too is the fact that like when you like an entrepreneur, the entrepreneur goal is eventually basically they all say what to sell, right? And when you talk to these people, like getting you set up, the biggest thing they'll say to you, like, can that place survive without you? And getting it going. So it's interesting. You're so right, Nelson, in regards to that culture. It can't be a you thing. It has to be an us thing. And about who we are, whether one person's here or not. Does this culture change if these 3 people leave? Does this culture change? So you really have to figure it in ground and figure out what's important to you and your people, and then hire according to that too. Like we have 4 core values, and those core values are in our hiring. It's in our evaluations. We even have I kid you not, a crocheted purple squirrel called CC, because CC stands for all the first letters of our 4 core values. But everybody in this company understands CC because CC goes with our vacations and has been around the world more than I have been. But people know what our culture is because of those 4 words.
Wow.
As we kind of come to the end of our conversation, which Marcia, you got to come back because we can talk for 3 hours. I think one of the things that's really driving home for me is the benefit of surrounding yourself as a business leader with minds that are not familiar, maybe that are not subscribing to the same things that you're thinking about all day. And you both have brought up so many good points that are so refreshing. And from your perspective, your expertise of expertise. And I think that's so important. And I think I just want to kind of round out with some thoughts around that. Talk to me just a little bit, Marcia, about the value of, you talked about we complement, when we go into an organization, but what is the value of having that person sitting next to you as a business leader who, has a fresh perspective, has a point of view, isn't afraid to tell you, look, this thing is going to break if we don't address it, and is there to help you get better without maybe being so concerned about how you feel about it, if that makes sense. Talk to me just a little bit about that relationship as you kind of work with the folks that you work with.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a really good understanding about the client and what their expectations are, what they need. The nice thing about my team is they have all different kinds of backgrounds and responsibilities. So when we do basically a talent survey of my own team, like every 6 months, to make sure that my whole team knows all the skills that we have on our team. So when we're out at a client and we're hearing basically, because I can't be everywhere, my sales guys can't be everywhere. So they're that person basically talking to that CEO. And now someone will say, hey, I really need somebody who can design this. Well, boom, I have over here Trish. She can design this because she's done it before. How about I bring her in for a conversation? We talk about it and what we want to do, but get it going. That is added value. And I think that's what makes us stand out more than a lot of our competitors. We're always showing that added value of what we can do to make things better and faster. And one of the things I've learned right now was when a company gets started, especially for HR, they look at us, and I've actually been recommending some PEOs. Now, are they competitors? Yeah, they certainly are. But I look at it, well, I hear you. I'm with you there, Nelson. But I'm trying to help that client get started and try to do it as cost efficient as possible. But I'll say to them, you probably need a strategic HR person along the way. They're not going to be able to do that. We will, and we'll help you with that. I said, but when you get to a certain size, you have to keep in mind, you will need your own HRIS system. You will need your own payroll system. It'll get harder the you get bigger you become away from that. So we really talk about all those different things to help the client out, also trying to help them save money and try to let them know we're a strategic partner all the way through. So get ready, because you're not paying me basically to tell you what you need to hear. I'm telling you basically what either you need and want, and you have to hear.
Nelson, that's familiar too, right? And that's the difference, I guess, between a consultancy and a fractional sort of teammate, somebody who comes in and doesn't just sort of say, here's some things I identified are wrong. Good luck to you. Here's my report. But we're in this for the long haul to help us get better together. Yeah.
Absolutely true. We are their CFO just on a part-time basis. And Marcia, from the fractional roles that you play in the CHRO, you fill that role just on that fractional basis. We're not the drive-by consultants. This is not a pretty report to get to look at. And after we did our discovery, we're the ones who actually have to help these business owners build and scale their organization that's going to help them achieve their goals.
Yeah, it's so cool too, because we have that HR and we have the recruiting side. And on our recruiting side, we have the same model as we charge hourly. And it's really nice because our HR will go in and be like, your HR is really is not as strong as it could be. Can we just bring in 2 of our people in and help them get moving? And once we start doing that and how fast we do it, they're like, oh my gosh, these people are great. And we're not trying to get rid of people's jobs. We're just trying to help them become better. Mm-hmm. And I think once people realize that we're not a threat, that we truly are an advocate, a strategic partner, that's when the magic begins to happen.
Marcia Zaruba O'Connor is the CEO and founder at the O'Connor Group. Find her and her team at tocgrp.com. And team, this has been a great conversation. I'm looking forward to whenever the 3 of us can get together again, or bring 4 more people in, and let's just have a whole roundtable about this stuff, because it's fascinating. And I'm so appreciative of all of your guidance and all of your generosity with your expertise today. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.